So I got my screws in. My screen's still in the clamps, and you can see it just kind of goes up, down, and up and down. So that's that pivot point that lets me line up whatever's in the screen to whatever I'm printing on the board later on. So this is where the Mylar comes in. I want what's called a printing flop, which lets me print onto a clear surface, and then I can line my paper up underneath. So that helps with registration, with lining up one layer to another, because I can physically print my first layer on my paper. Once it's dry, I can line it up underneath here, print my second layer on here, and then I can move it around until they line up. And I mark the edges of my paper, and I can just keep printing. And again, I'll go over this when I make the in the printing tutorial as well. But just as an FYI of why this is here. So I like to have it just a couple inches away from where the end of the clamps are, because I don't want it to get pinched underneath there. And I want it relatively straight along this edge. So what I do is I just take that duct tape, make sure it's about the same distance. There we go. And then I'm going to tape this down. You can use painter's tape for this if you want, but since you're making your own board and you're setting it up and you're the only one who's using it, you might as well use tape that's a little bit more permanent. And again, if you're using masking tape or painter's tape, you're probably going to have to replace it every couple layers that you print, because it's just going to get kind of waffled in the end. So I like to put this down so that it overlaps the Mylar just a little bit. Use my X-Acto knife to cut it. And then I like to put a little end sort of piece. On each side, just to reinforce that hinge that's created by the tape. And then sometimes I'll put a little one in the middle, just again as a reinforcement. And this is just cheap, like Harbor Freight duct tape. There's nothing special about it. Sometimes at school I'll use Gorilla tape because that's a little bit beefier. But honestly, I think the thinner the tape, the better for that hinge. So now this is in place, and just like the hinge created by the print clamps, the screen print clamps, this keeps this landing in the same exact place every time. So the Mylar I've used is a 0.05 millimeters thick, I think. The thicker the better. To be completely honest, the thicker it is, the longer it's going to last you. Because over time it'll get pinched or like rubbed against, and it'll get these little like dents and stuff that can affect how you see through it and how you line up what you're printing on it to the paper that goes underneath. And that can be super frustrating. So the thicker the better. The thinner stuff tends to get more like dinked up and waffled more quickly. So the more money you spend on the Mylar now, the more money you save later on, because you're not replacing it every couple prints or whatever. So this can just flip off the edge right there, and that's called a Mylar flop or a registration flop, because it just flops off the edge. It's my floppy. And then I want to put something down to protect the MDF that makes it easier to clean up ink that spills on it. And also when I'm printing, and I'll go over this again later, I'll often put a little bit of spray adhesive down to hold my paper in place. It'll kind of stick to the board. But if I do that directly on the MDF, sometimes I'll get these little wood fibers on the back of my paper that can affect how each consecutive layer after the first one prints, because you get these little like weird bumps and shapes that show up. So if I just cover that with some contact paper from here to here, it'll be easier to clean in the area that I'm actually printing on, and it'll keep the spray tack from messing up the edge of the top of the board there of the MDF. So this is tricky. I wish I had like some pointers to make this go easy. It's the most frustrating part of the process for me. So to get a corner started of contact paper, and you can get this is clear, which might not show up as well on camera. I generally get kind of like a fake wood pattern. And so this is just that sticky stuff that people put on the, their shelves inside their cabinets in their kitchen. My grandmother always had it. She'd get ones that had like wallpaper floral patterns on it. What I do for schools, I usually buy like kind of a funny, I think it's funny anyway, like a marble textured one or a wood textured one, so that I know that it's what I've provided for the school. But you can get, they'll print, and this is why it's frustrating, because it's just like getting it started peeling is always a pain in the neck. But you can get ones, like you can get this like Disney princesses on it and polka dots or stripes or whatever you're into. Okay, so I've kind of got that started. And again, not very pretty looking, but it'll work. And I just want to kind of stick that down. And then if I'm careful, I can sort of peel this away. And maybe get it all back into being a single piece. And so I like to kind of push it down just right there in the middle, run that off the edge, and then from that middle I can kind of push it out, and that should eliminate some of the air bubbles. And I'll do the same thing towards myself. So again, I want to be careful. I don't want this on top of my duct tape on the inside of my flop, because I don't want to create, like a resistance to it flopping back over. And I just kind of need it, kind of centered from here to here should do that. And if it's not perfectly straight, like you can see mine's kind of a little cattywampus. It's a little wonky, but that's still going to work. That's going to be fine. And then I'll just use the edge and the X-Acto knife as my cutting. And voila. Cut off that extra paper there. And so that's my flop, my contact paper or shelving paper to protect the board, my flop, and my screen, all right there. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll get like a little metal handle, or you can get like a cupboard handle or something so that I have a way to carry it. And I just store it generally standing up on a side behind, a cabinet, or out of the way when I'm not using it, and then I can just bring it out and set it on my work surface, and I'm ready to print. So excellent, we got that part done. Move on to the next.